heard about Cuphead is true. It is an incredibly difficult side-scrolling shooter, with relentless boss battles that demand rapid-fire actions and reactions making up the bulk of its gameplay. Toppling these imposing bosses is both a monumental and rewarding task. But difficult boss battles only tell half of the story. Cuphead's 1930s cartoon aesthetic is endlessly charming, popping with color and expression unlike anything seen in a video game before. The sheer variety of characters and settings yields consistent delight as you go from one stage to the next, with everything bearing the telltale signs of grainy 30s film and rudimentary production techniques. The characters and bosses that are clearly inspired by cartoon legends like Betty Boop break free from the expected to surprise you with something new. Never mind that Betty's lookalike is a mermaid now. It's the moment her head breaks free from her body and lures you into a tightly designed cavern while spewing skull-filled projectiles that gives you pause. If you can appreciate the unique animation style, you will be doubly impressed when you see what developer Studio MDHR has brought to the table. If its technical execution wasn't enough, MDHR's creativity puts Cuphead in a league of its own. Outside of one-on-one fights, you also have a few opportunities to run and gun through less imposing platforming stages. These help break up the action and give you a chance to collect coins that can be cashed in for weapons and passive buffs. Coins are in short supply and can only be collected once, so farming to gain an advantage is out of the question. The mix of weaponry you have to pick from, which your character fires from their fingertips, includes the likes of a spread shot, a charge blast, and a boomerang round. There are 6 in all, and each comes with a secondary attack that's tied to a meter, which fills when you successfully land shots on enemies. You can also earn meter by parrying pink projectiles, a task that requires you to jump, and then tap jump again at just the right time before making contact with a projectile. Finally, you have a super art, which can only be fired when your entire meter is full, as opposed to spending one section of that meter to fire your secondary attack. The one catch here is that when your meter is full, you have no option to perform the secondary attack alone. You are inconveniently forced to unleash your super art, which isn't always desirable. Every boss fight consists of multiple stages or forms. Bosses will change shape, position, and behavior with each new phase, and within an individual phase, you may see as many as 4 different attacks, though you aren't always guaranteed to see them all, which keeps up the element of surprise. The fear of the unexpected is part of what makes Cuphead such a thrilling game, beyond the frantic moment-to-moment tension as you hold on desperately to your 3 hit points, or 4 if you equip a charm that weakens your firepower in exchange for health. But when the only question in your head is, in what order will the boss attacks appear, fights take on a new light. Fatigue and frustration are common reactions when faced with a particularly challenging battle, and it's in these moments you start to identify a few places where Cuphead could do a slightly better job of keeping you informed of your own progress and capabilities. Beyond bosses changing phases, you can never tell exactly how close to death, or a phase change for that matter, they actually are. At best, you can see a plotline of the battle after death to gauge your relative progress. Given the array of weaponry at your disposal, you may begin to question if you're carrying the right tools for the job. But beyond revisiting old fights, which is actually more arduous than it should be, as you traverse the map slowly and can't fast travel, there actually isn't a great way to familiarize yourself with new weapons. And there's unfortunately no way to tell exactly how much damage one weapon does compared to another. Vague descriptions are all you get. If Cuphead's fights were indeed puzzles with one correct solution, this would be incredibly frustrating. As it stands, there's only a small amount of frustration to be found while fumbling with new weapons and dying in the process. And it may sound like a minor thing to praise, but the fact that boss battles reload in 1 or 2 seconds is a godsend when it comes to trial and error tactics. Cuphead does support 2-player local co-op as well, but it's pretty evident that this makes life more difficult for you and your partner. Despite the intricate chaos that you face alone in any given fight, when you add a whole another character and more projectiles on screen, playing with a friend makes it far more difficult to discern your surroundings and much easier to slip up. And so far as we can tell, boss's health scales up when you play with a friend. Now you do have a small window of time to revive a fallen comrade by parrying their ghost, but it's a mere few seconds while it floats up to the top of the screen before disappearing for the remainder of the fight. For anyone interested in getting a taste of Cuphead without facing its ultimate wrath, there are simpler versions of every boss that you can fight, but you won't be able to face the final bouts unless you beat every standard boss on the normal difficulty. In reality, you may as well stick with the standard fights as Cuphead is relentless no matter how you play. Cuphead has been a long time coming, and it's great to see that it lives up to its initial promises. It's beautiful to look at, with a pitch-perfect soundtrack to boot, and it perfectly captures the era its developers so clearly revere. It's also an intense action game that pulls no punches and makes every shot you land feel like a minor victory. It could benefit from a few options to familiarize yourself with your weapons, and 2-player co-op doesn't feel like the valuable addition you might imagine. But Cuphead remains a rare, unique game that truly stands out.